Hello friends, welcome to the Azure Cloud Learning Series. Today we are going to cover about the containers and the Dockers. Our main learning topic is what exactly is Azure Container and how to use that. So let's first understand about the containers. So before we have seen what is the virtualization, what is the VM, how to create that in this series. Now we have to understand how the containerization is different and virtualization. So if you see this diagram, you can see what is virtualization. When we have distributed our infrastructure into different machines with different OS, that is nothing but a virtualization. One physical server has been divided into different machines in the virtualization. The container is different than virtualization in aspects of using the operating system. So what exactly is the container? Is standard package of software known as container, bundles with the application code together with the related configuration files and the libraries and all the dependencies which application require to run. This is like a complete package for an application to run. This may contains all the dependencies what application require to run. You used to create a container so that if you want to deploy an application, just take an image of that container and deploy it. You need not to worry about the dependencies and all because you have already done at once while creating the container. So if you want to understand how it works, let's suppose you have a physical device. You have a physical device which has some hard disk, some RAM, something. And in virtualization, you have segregated those infrastructure with the help of hypervisor, different OS with different machines. So in virtualization, you are sharing the resource, a physical resource, not the dependencies or a different OS, a different operating system license will be required for a different virtual machine. But while we are talking about the container, we have an operating system. We have on top of the infrastructure and our container engine is creating the container or we are creating the container while using the same operating system for that resource. Even it isolates from one container to another container. How it isolates? A container is collection of all the libraries, all the dependencies, what you require to run that app 1. Suppose app 1 required that application to be run at different dependencies that app 2. So or app 1 required a different app server or different web server to run. But that should dependent on the operating system. What does it mean? As you see in the machine, one operating system is there. We are sharing that operating system to different container. So in that machine, only the container with the same operating system exists. What does it mean? If you have a Windows operating system machine and you are creating the container on top of that, so all the container will be based on the Windows only. If you have a Linux machine, all the container will be dependent on the Linux only. So container is nothing but a runnable instance of an image, and image is a collection of the resources what you require to run the application. A container relatively well isolated from other containers because this is the container what you create on the basis of the resources what you required for the application to be installed. Virtual machines and containers differ in a several way, but the basic difference is containers provide a way to virtualize an OS so that multiple workloads can run on a single OS instance. That's why I told different container exists in a system will be dependent on the same OS. While VM is a hardware being virtualized, it's not software being virtualized. In container, a software is being virtualized. There are different ways to maintain the containers. Like Docker is a way to manage the containers, how to create that and all. So Docker is an open platform for developing, shipping, and running the applications. So basically, what you see in the container engine, there are different ways, different softwares are there to manage all the containers through different systems. Like Kubernetes is a way, Docker engine is a way, So there are different engines available in the market to deploy and manage those containers. Now we will be talking about the Dockers. So Docker is nothing. Docker is an open source platform for developing, shipping, and the running application. You create a containers and using the Docker, you used to manage that. If you want to pull the containers, if you want to deploy the containers using the Docker engine, you can do all this. So let's understand the Docker architecture. If you see this diagram, I'm just expanding this. If you just see the diagram, we have a Docker host, we have a registry, and we have a client. So Docker uses the client server architecture. Why I'm saying client server architecture? Docker architecture is having some client which used to pull and push the containers, and all the containers is residing in the registry. So you can see Docker client talks to Docker daemon using the APIs. Using the APIs, client used to connect with the Docker daemon, and Docker daemon manages the request which is coming from the client. So Docker daemon and the client can run on the same system, or it can run on the different system. Client is responsible to call what exactly you required, what containers you required, and if you want to pull, if you want to push, client is just sending the command, and Docker daemon is responsible to fulfill those commands. Docker client, it is the primary way of many Docker users to interact with the Docker. So like any client server architecture, the same responsible with the client, and here you can say Docker daemon and the containers, it is nothing but a host, Docker host. Docker registry stores the Docker images. All the Docker images which are not in the running states are stored into the registry. So Docker registry stores the Docker images. Docker Hub is a public registry that anyone can use, and Docker is configured to look images Docker Hub by default. You can even run your own private own registry. Whenever you use the Docker pull or Docker push command, it always take or stores the images on registry, and instances will be running on the Docker daemon using the Docker daemon in the Docker host. What all are the Docker objects? So whatever the name you are listening from last 2-3 minutes, containers and the images, these are nothing but the Docker objects. Images, container, networks, volumes, plugins, and there are multiple objects which we use while running the application, or different infrastructure while you use the running the application with the Docker, that is nothing but a Docker objects. So if you see here, what we have the Docker object as a container is also a Docker object, image is also a Docker object. If it is on the image state, then it is mostly registered with the registry, and if it is in the running state, client used to pull the Dockers from the registry and running into the instances for the container. So this is the basic theory behind the Dockers and the containers. Now we will be doing some labs, and we will see in labs how we do the how we install the Dockers and how we do the virtualization on the virtual machine. Even on the local desktop also we will see how to install all this and what all the requirements and steps are there. So let's first create a virtual machine. So I've already created the virtual machine. I will be just showing you. Go to the resource, and this is the public API. So I will be connecting this using the putty. So I'm just connecting using the putty. Login as my username and password. So after connecting this, we will be running some command to install the Docker, and so I've just listed all the commands here. One by one I will be going and running over there. So first we'll be updating the update. Then I will be installing. So I am getting the notice because the virtual machine what I have created is very less space. So okay, I will be using this. Yes. So it's now installing the. Now I will be registering the Gpg key for the Docker. So register the Gpg key for that. Then I will be setting up the repository for that. Then I will be updating the. So it's getting updated. Now installing the Docker command. Sudo apt-get install Docker. C is the community edition. C means community edition. So I'm just installing the community edition of Docker. Do you want to continue? Yes. Now again I will be running the update command. So Docker is getting installed. I will be post installing. I will be running the update command on that. Okay. So just running the update command. Proper and linking the file. Enable to link the directory. Reading package list could not open the permission able to log the directory. Okay, let me see what permission is denied. Now I will be installing the Nginx server, web server to the this Linux machine. The command is docker run whatever the Docker you want to install. I'm installing on the Nginx and then mapping the port. So let this install. In the meantime, I will be describing what exactly I was doing. So first, it always try to install the Nginx from the local. If it is not there, then it will go to the Docker's URL and fetch the installable from there and install there all the libraries, whatever is required for the Nginx. So now you have a system. Let me just describe this. Now you have a system. So now if you try to understand what exactly we have this Docker system. This is container, right? And we have one more. This is our machine. In that we have a different Docker. We have this is one container. This is maybe different container. This is different container. So in this container, if we talk about this container, in this container we have installed Nginx, and in this container we have mapped port 80 to the port 80 of this server. So what does it mean? If we will try to access of this port 80 access, this Nginx, this container Nginx server port 80 will be accessible to the user. So we have seen, we have already installed the Nginx server over here. Now we'll go to the VM and confirm whether in the networking we have added the inbound rule for 80 port. So if you see, I have already added the inbound port for the 80. So it means port 80 is accessible from outside. Now go to the overview, copy this tab, copy this URL, and their different Nginx will be. Now we'll see. Okay. Now you can see a default Nginx piece is displayed here. So it means Nginx is installed to the container, not on the virtual machine. this because we have pulled the container image. We have run the Docker and we have pulled the Nginx image into the Docker. So now this Nginx image has been installed in that particular container. We don't have, and as port 80 is mapped to the port 80 of the container, that's why when we are accessing the IP with port 80, our container which is having the Nginx that is running over there. So now we'll be seeing some little bit commands like how to check whatever the Docker is present here there. So for that, sudo docker ps, we can see all the container whatever is available in that. For sudo docker image listing will be listing all the images whatever present here there. If you want to stop the Docker, then sudo docker stop sudo docker container stop. So no need to give full ID. You can give 4 or 5 digit ID. So sudo docker container stop, and I just stopping that. So it's a stop. So now if you go and try to access the URL what we have accessed before, if I just refresh it, it is not accessible because the container is already stopped. Again we can start, check sudo docker start, and 4 digit you can give 6A 0C. So it will be started, and we can just refresh and see. Okay, now it's started. So we have seen how to create a VM and how to install the Docker over there in the Linux system, and in how to pull the container for Nginx and see whether Nginx is running or not. Some Docker commands like for listing images and the Dockers and start and stop. Now I will be covering what if you want to install the Docker on your local. So first you have to make sure you have a Windows subsystem for Linux in your local host. So for that you have to go to the program control panel, install the program. Some of the basic feature you have to make sure you should have, like, so go to the control panel and turn off the feature. I have already turned on containers Hyper-V, my Windows subsystem. If you see virtual machine platform, and one is subsystem for the Linux, Windows subsystem for the Linux. So when you enable all this feature, you actually can install the Linux on top of your Windows. So that's why it is called subsystem. So in that case, both the operating system can run, or in the Docker you can have both the Linux subsystem or the Windows subsystem. I have already installed the Docker and just wanted to show how it is. So I have written the step also here. This is install the Docker desktop from this URL. Install the Ubuntu 20.0 LTS. You have to make sure all the steps you can find out in the Microsoft documentation also. So the four feature you have to make sure it has to be on, like virtual machine platform, Windows subsystem for Linux, container, and Hyper-V. And this has to be installed, and Docker has to be installed. So now I will show you the Docker what I have installed. So you can see Docker engine is starting. I have, this is the Linux Docker installed on the Linux subsystem. So you can see I have some images will be listed here. Using these images, if you have created the container, it will be in use. If you have not created the container, it will not be in the use. So container apps I have in this if you want to run, we have a good UI to manage all this. So this Docker is nothing but to manage all the containers, whatever you have created on your local. So I have just started this. So you can see the CLI for this. If you want to run some command, if you want to install something, like if you want to install the Nginx over here. So what I will do, I will just run the command for the to install the Nginx here. Just copying this command from here, and we need to. Okay, maybe all the libraries has not been installed over here. So first we have to install all the libraries over here. So the same step you have to follow, nothing. You have to update and you have to do all this. Let's see. You have to follow the same steps, whatever we have followed on the Azure Linux virtual machine. As you have seen, this is the Linux containers. As I have installed in the local Linux subsystem, but I can always switch to the Windows container also. So I'm just switching it and showing it to you what containers I have in the Windows containers. So I'm just switching it to the Windows container. Switch. Refresh. Okay. So you can see we don't have any image, we don't have any containers over here, as I have not created any containers or images in the local Windows system. You can always go and create. So I have created a Docker application, a simple template solution for the application and configured for the Docker. So I'm just opening that, and you will see the Docker file over here. In that, all the configuration will be listed. So if you just see, we have this Docker file. This Docker file, what all the project. And if you see, I have changed the configuration for my Docker for Windows, whether this system Docker file, whatever the solution Docker file, it is configured on the Linux container. So either we can switch Docker for the Linux container, or we can switch our application for the Windows container. So currently I'm just switching the Docker for the Linux container. So now my container is running as a Linux container. And if you see, all the configuration will be listed into the Docker file. What is the Docker? Where is the Docker? What is the working directory? All the configuration will be in the Docker file. Now if you see, we have WSL2 and the Docker. So what does it mean? When we are running with this WSL2 or with the Docker build, it will be running onto the Linux Docker system. So I'm just running into there. This is WSL means Windows Subsystem for Linux. So you can just see it has created two Dockers. It has this code has been linked with this. Any we can this is running in both the Dockers. I can just stop one and can be running in one. And if I know, so if we just see our application is running in the crazy pair Docker, and if I just go to the browser, we can see our application has given the output for using this container. Now, just I am stopping that this container also. Now, so you can see we can enable and disable with this containers, whether this dotted code, whatever you have created, it can be deployed on any container. So you can go to the Docker and see here also it is in the logs, it is running over here. There are different things to inspect. You can see what is the environment, what is the port. See, since the port 80 is not open for that container, that's why we cannot run directly onto the localhost and all. You can see the stats also. So this is nothing but a dashboard where you can visualize the container's performance and all. So you can always stop, restart, everything you can do it from here. So now if you just go and see the publish options, you can either in Docker container registry, in local also you can, which Docker hub you want to select, you can select it from here. Or if you want to go to the Azure Container registry, as I have described before, this image or this the container, the code and the dependencies all will be deployed into one image, and that image will be deployed to the Docker. When you run the instance of that image, then only application will be in the running stage. So you can just see, you can give the targets and all. You have a multiple option. I am just showing what all the options is available. So in Azure, we have already seen in Docker Container Registry, we have Azure Container Registry, we have a Docker Hub or other Docker Hub registry containers. So maybe there are some different system which you can use for the publish profile. This is all about your containers, Dockers, how to install and what is the different commands for everything. Now I will show about the Azure container. So I'm just going and creating a resource for Azure Containers. So you can see the container registry. Azure Container Registry is a private registry hosting the container image. So the container image you can host it here. What we have shown there, we can just, it's a very normal steps. Just go there, choose the resource group. I'm just choosing the Linux system group. You can give the registry name. I'm just giving the Docker registry name. Location is okay. Docker test. So if you want to give the endpoint encryption, that is, if you have all this, when you will be creating, when you have created this private, some validation got failed. So validation field required information missing. Okay, some information we have not given. Some basic. The registry Docker test 1 maybe. Okay, Docker test for demo. Okay, this is available. Now we will review and create. Now, when we have seen this publish, when you go here, Docker Container Registry, and either in Azure Container Registry or in the, if you give go here, so you will be seeing, okay, it is not a reference till now. It has not been created, I think. Create. So when it will be created, then your container registry will be shown here. because I have already linked my Visual Studio to my Azure account. So again, we have to refresh that, go to the start, and I'm just going to Docker Container Registry, Azure Container Registry. I have not view resource group. Okay, I have to select the resource group. So now you can see we have this in Linux system group. We have this Docker test for demo. So we can publish the application over here. So we can see it is pushing into the, all the files is getting pushed into the that registry. So it's successfully published onto the registry now. So we have published our code into that registry. Now we have to run the registry and see whether the application is working or not. But this is the overall idea. What about the, we have targeted for the containers, Dockers, and the how to install the VM, how to install the Dockers on the VM, how to install the, what all the necessary things we require for the Linux subsystem, and what exactly is Azure Container. So we can go and see here all the things has been created. We can see whatever we have published and all. So this is all about the Docker, what we have created, the Azure Container, and more or less about the containerization for the applications what we have done. Thanks for watching this. We will be continuing this video with the Kubernetes. Thanks.